There's a specific moment in the life of every seasoned woman when you realize that the well-intended advice surrounding you is actually a sophisticated trap. It is a trap wrapped in the shimmering ribbon of societal expectation, disguised as a romantic sunset, and handed to you by people who are convinced they know exactly what is best for your soul. My name is Eleanor. I am 85 years old. Yes, you heard that correctly. I've been walking this earth for 85 years. I'm well aware that at my age, society expects me to be anchored to a rocking chair, knitting pastel blankets, baking endless batches of cookies for the neighborhood kids, and speaking only in sweet, gentle platitudes about the endurance of eternal love. But I'm not here today to spin a romantic fairy tale. I'm not here to convince you that finding a man in your golden years is the ultimate key to life's mysteries. I'm here to speak directly to those of you who are 45, 55, 65, or older. You are the women who have lived, who have raised families, built formidable careers, survived devastating heartbreaks, and finally carved out a piece of this world for yourselves. I'm here to talk about the absolute best decision I ever made in my entire life. And that decision was leaving a man at the altar when I was 82 years old. Arthur, my first and only husband, passed away 22 years ago. I was 63 at the time. After the initial, a heavy fog of grief finally lifted, I slowly learned the art of being alone. And for 2 decades, I did not just survive. I thrived. I truly did. I established a rhythm to my life that was entirely my own. However, when I turned 82, a strange thing happened. Many of my dearest friends had passed away or transitioned into care facilities. The house began to feel just a little too quiet. The Sunday afternoons felt a little too long. That is exactly when Samuel walked into my life. He was a widower, perfectly polite, wore impeccably pressed shirts, and always opened the car door for me. He was safe. He was predictable. When he proposed, I said yes. I did not say yes because my heart was on fire. I said yes because I was suddenly terrified of being the last one left standing. The ivory lace dress was hanging quietly in my closet. The caterer had been paid the deposit. The invitations had been mailed out to everyone we knew. And then, exactly 14 days before the big day, I pulled the plug on the entire thing. People thought I had lost my mind. They called me crazy. They called me bitter. They told me I was going to regret my choice because I would end up dying alone. But let me tell you a secret. They were completely wrong. Because what nobody tells you is that remarriage for older women is often a massive risk. There are 7 harsh, brutal realities about saying I do in your later years. I almost learned them the hard way. And today, I'm going to share all 7 of them with you. Reason number 1, the financial black hole. When you are in your 20s and you get married, you're building a life from scratch. You pool your pennies, you buy your first beat-up sofa, and you figure it out together. But when you are older, you have already spent decades of blood, sweat, and tears building your financial foundation. You have planned for a quiet, secure future. Merging your finances at an advanced age is not an act of romance. It is an act of extreme danger. Let me tell you about my dear friend Clara's younger sister, Beatrice. Beatrice decided to remarry when she was 60 years old. She married a man who seemed incredibly stable. 9 months after they stood at the altar, the collection notices started arriving in the mail. It turned out this perfectly respectable man had $30,000 in hidden credit card debt. He had thousands more in unpaid medical bills, and he had co-signed a massive loan for his irresponsible grown son, who had completely stopped making payments. When you sign that marriage certificate, his financial disasters suddenly become your legal nightmare. Beatrice's retirement account began to evaporate as she tried to save their home from his creditors. When Samuel proposed to me and said, "What is mine is yours," I felt a cold chill run down my spine. My bank account is not a charity for reckless grandpas who cannot manage their credit cards. Reason number 2, the death of the thermostat dictatorship. This might sound like a small thing, but believe me, it is the cornerstone of your daily happiness. I call it the loss of your hard-earned personal autonomy. Over my 22 years of living alone, I discovered the absolute joy of living exactly the way I wanted to. I loved eating a piece of burnt toast and a scrambled egg for dinner instead of cooking a massive pot roast. I loved staying up until midnight watching terrible reality television shows without anyone judging me. Most importantly, I loved keeping the thermostat set to exactly 68 degrees. With Samuel, I found myself automatically shrinking back into the role of the accommodating woman. I started turning down the volume on the television because it gave him a headache. I started wearing a heavy sweater inside my own house because he was always cold and kept turning the heat up to 75 degrees. Women of our generation are trained to compromise. We have spent our whole lives making ourselves smaller to fit into the spaces left over by the men we love. When you finally get your house to yourself, you get to be the undisputed dictator of the thermostat, the remote control, and the kitchen menu. Gaining your freedom after a lifetime of compromise only to voluntarily hand it right back is a profound tragedy. Reason number 3, the inheritance war. When you get married later in life, you're not just impacting your own future. You're throwing a massive wrench into the legacy you have built for your children. A few weeks before my planned wedding, my daughter asked me to meet her for lunch. She barely touched her food. With tears in her eyes, she looked at me and asked what would happen to the family home after I married Samuel. She asked if everything Arthur and I had worked for would suddenly belong to a stranger. I met with my estate lawyer the very next day. He gave me the most sobering reality check of my life. He said, "Eleanor, the moment you say 'I do,' Samuel becomes your legal next of kin. A surviving spouse has legal rights to your estate that can completely override whatever is written in your will." He told me horror stories of children who were entirely disinherited because a new husband challenged the will in court and won. I pictured my children spending years in a bitter, expensive legal battle against Samuel just to keep the house they grew up in. I refused to gamble my family's legacy just because I was feeling a little lonely. Reason number 4, the unpaid nurse trap. This is the reality that makes people very uncomfortable, but it is a truth we must face with clear eyes. As we age, our bodies break down. It is a fact of life. Let us use a little dry humor here, shall we? Many older men who are desperately looking for a wife are not actually looking for a soulmate to discuss poetry with. They are looking for a nurse with a purse. My friend Margaret remarried when she was 67. Her new husband was vibrant and active. 3 years later, he suffered a massive stroke. Overnight, Margaret's relaxing retirement turned into a grueling 24-hour shift of heavy lifting. She had to bathe him, dress him, and drive him to endless doctor appointments. When I visited her, she looked like she had aged 15 years. She was exhausted down to her bones. I spent the last 2 years of my first husband's life acting as his full-time medical caregiver. I did it with all the devotion in my heart, but the physical toll was staggering. The grim reality is that when a man gets sick, his wife takes care of him at home. But when a woman gets sick, she is far more likely to end up in a nursing care facility. I've already done my time on the medical front lines. I am officially announcing my retirement from the nursing profession. I absolutely refuse to sign up for another tour of duty. Reason number 5, merging mountains of clutter and the breaking point. When you are 25 and you move in with a man, he brings a few boxes of clothes. But when you're combining lives at 82 years old, you're dealing with decades of entrenched habits and literal mountains of accumulated junk. This brings me to the exact moment I knew I could not marry Samuel. It was a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 14 days before the wedding. I was sitting right here, drinking tea, admiring my peaceful, lavender-scented living room. Suddenly, a delivery truck pulled into my driveway. 2 men carried a massive, hideous, dark brown leather recliner chair through my front door. Samuel had sent it ahead of time so he would have a comfortable place to sit when he officially moved in. They placed that giant brown monstrosity right in the center of my delicate floral rug. I stared at it, and I felt like I could not breathe. That chair was not just a piece of furniture. It was a symbol of his entire 75 years of baggage, his rigid routines, and his expectation that my beautiful, peaceful space would simply absorb his life. I realized right then and there that I was not just making room for a chair. I was making room for his arguments, his preferences, and his mess. Looking at that ugly brown leather, the spell was completely broken. That chair saved my life. Reason number 6, the exhaustion of emotional labor. We women carry a very heavy, invisible backpack throughout our entire lives. It is called emotional labor. We manage the social calendar. We notice when someone is feeling down, and we act as the emotional shock absorbers for our entire households. When I was engaged to Samuel, I suddenly realized that the invisible backpack had been strapped right back onto my shoulders. I was the one mediating small arguments between him and his adult sons. I was the one listening to him complain for an hour about the poor service at the grocery store. If I wanted to have lunch with my girlfriends, I had to explain where I was going so he would not feel neglected. There is an unmatched, glorious liberation in waking up in the morning and only having to manage your own feelings. If I wake up feeling grumpy, I can just be grumpy. I do not have to put on a cheerful face to make sure a man feels comfortable. I do not want to spend the final chapters of my life explaining why I want to spend an entire Tuesday sitting by the window in absolute silence. Reason number 7, the supreme luxury of selfishness. This brings me to the final reason. It is about breaking free from the biggest lie society has ever told women. For generations, the world has whispered that a woman standing alone is a tragic figure. We are taught that if we do not have a man on our arm, we are incomplete or pitiful. When I accepted Samuel's proposal, I did not do it out of a burning, undeniable love. I did it because I was terrified of the whispers. I was terrified of being the old woman eating soup alone in her kitchen. But as I stared at that ugly brown recliner, I had a massive epiphany. The ultimate joy of getting older is finally realizing that you are already whole. You do not need a partner to validate your existence on this planet. Staying single is not an act of giving up on life. It is the ultimate, triumphant act of choosing yourself. It is the supreme luxury of selfishness. And let me tell you, after 85 years of living, I have earned the absolute right to be selfish. I have spent my life being a daughter, a wife, a mother, and a caregiver. Now, I just want to be Eleanor, and that is more than enough. The moment those delivery men left, I picked up the telephone and I called Samuel. I told him the wedding was off, and I told him to send the truck back for his chair. He was furious. His pride was deeply hurt. The last thing he said to me was that I was going to die alone and that I would regret it bitterly. I just smiled into the receiver. I thought to myself, Samuel, you might be right about the dying alone part, but I won't regret a single second of it, because I would rather pass away alone in a quiet house that smells like lavender and absolute peace than pass away married and stressed out, listening to a man complain about the temperature of his soup. I chose my freedom. I chose my peace. And sitting here today, I have never felt more alive. If my story resonated with you today, or if you are a woman who has also chosen the beautiful, peaceful path of staying single in your golden years, please share your own experiences down in the comments section below. Don't forget to share this video with a friend or a sister who might need a gentle reminder that she is perfectly complete, exactly as she is.